Okay, let me just make sure that everything's working. Having a weird kind of error. Let me just see when it updates.
Influence is in
Let's see if that updated. Because I can't see it through my Streamlabs. It's so annoying. Everything should be working, but as people join, please let me know. I can also just check on my
modernism,
phone.
a transformative art movement beginning around the early 20th century.
So what he's going to talk about in this video is, in particular, James Joyce, and I think he does a very good job of explaining Joyce, probably much better than I ever could. And yeah, I love this guy. He is very good at explaining things, and he can say things in a way that I can't quite articulate, and I'm almost jealous of how he's able to do it because these are the kind of teachers that I wish I had when I was in high school, or I wish I had when I was in college, or even in grad school. It's very infrequent when you come across a person that actually loves teaching, that's what they love doing, and they are willing to put things in simple terms instead of trying to elevate things. Because when you think about a teacher, do they try to build themselves up by the idea that they think that they're smart? In other words, this topic's difficult and I understand this topic, so in laying out how complex this topic is, I make myself feel good. Versus a teacher that tries to bring it down to the level of the student. And I think that's what Professor Zhang does very, very well. And I had a lot of fun reacting to him on a prior stream. So we're gonna go through a video I watched previously. Maybe it draws up some insights that I was having while I was watching the video, but this is a very, very good video. What's up, Sahida? How's everything?
All right, so arguably the first great modern artist is James Joyce.
I would certainly agree with this. There's very few names that are at the stature of Joyce, and it's not even that everyone loves Joyce, but like you kind of have to appreciate him just for what he's doing. You've been taking notes on his civilization lecture series. Can you we can go over those. That would be interesting. How do I find that? Do I just look up Professor Zhang civilization lecture? I have no idea who this guy is. I'm pretty sure he's a high school teacher. He obviously has a very popular YouTube channel, and it's very fun to watch these videos.
Who in 1922 published Ulysses. Um, James Joyce was Irish. He was an Irish expatriate, and he actually studied Dante in university. So, um,
He was classically trained by Jesuits, which is very ironic because postmodernism is the destruction of symbols, the destruction of idols. So it's very interesting that his entire life was kind of denouncing this sort of thing he was up brought up with. What's up, Channel Static? How's everything? It's under his YouTube on our playlist. Okay.
he wrote Ulysses.
He's actually teaching in China. Dude, that's interesting. He says a lot of really like cool stuff. Like it just the way he puts things is good.
um, as a way to imitate and almost surpass Dante. And of course, Ulysses refers to Homer's Odyssey. Now,
Ulysses or Ulysses. I don't know how to say. I feel like I say it different every time. But basically he loosely models it off of the Odyssey as he just said, but it's very, very loose, and the only thing that really ties it is certain chapters, certain structure, and certain character names. But there's really not that much carryover in the story. In fact, the story only takes place throughout one single day, and it's kind of meant to exemplify the significance of our ordinary lives.
I'm going to read a passage from Ulysses to understand the power it's writing. Okay? In immutable modality of the visible, at least that, if no more, thought through my eyes. Signatures of all things I'm here to read, see spawn and see rack the nearing tide that rusty boot. Stark green, blue silver, rust, colored signs, limits of the Danfan, But yeah,
This is bringing back horrible memories. This is like an average page, and it's hilarious because he wrote another book. This book is even worse. This book there's like even less because he uses different languages. I don't even like look at this page. There's more notes than there is actual writing, and it's just like Joyce had like a weird needs for his writing to not be understood. Like you would think most writing, you want it to be understood, you want it to be able to be read, you want to be able to show people that your ideas are best. But Joyce is very much different in this, that he thought he was in some way replicating consciousness, in some way replicating the nature of reality and how we all kind of can only understand things through our eyes, and that there's something beyond understanding that we all deal with on a daily basis.
that embodies. Okay, what does this mean? I have no idea. All right, I have no idea. I can explain to you Dante, I can explain to you Homer and Shakespeare, but I struggle with James Joyce. And there are two reasons why. Okay, the first reason is
And see, I love his honesty here because like nobody understands Joyce. Nobody ever understands Joyce, and nobody ever will. There's companion books that attempt to, and they will in some way help you and aid you to kind of get a little bit more. But the thing about Ulysses and the thing about reading James Joyce is that every time you read it, you're going to get something new. Every time you read it, you're going to experience things. It's a work that almost grows with you. It's the only one like it I've ever stumbled upon, and it's very unique in that. But I think Borges put it bestly when talking about Ulysses is that it's a work to be admired, not to be read. You can almost be marveled with what Joyce was able to do, but it's not that fun to go into. I don't know. I would rather read 1,000 books before devoting the same amount of time to reading Ulysses, which you really need to do. It's something that you need to read every year and read throughout your lifetime and study and do background sort of research into trying to grasp.
is he was a singer, so you have to read what he writes as though it's music. Okay, it's meant to be read out loud, so it's musical, and that's really the power of his writing. He's more focusing on the style rather than the substance.
It's you have to read it out loud too. Like the best way that people say the best way to read it is to read it out loud with a group because then you can kind of collectively understand it. Um, there's when is Bloomsday? The day when this book takes place, there's like an entire festival in Dublin devoted to just the singular work of James Joyce. And it brings in millions of dollars every single year. And there's all these people reciting it. There's people enacting the scenes. There's people that take tours of the path that the guy walks through. But there's so much when it comes to this book. This
Okay,
weird
that's the
mythos that
first
he
thing.
created.
Second thing is that he was extremely well read. And everything that he writes, in every sentence, there are multiple allusions and references to other books. Okay, so you must have read what he read. You must have experienced what he experienced in order to understand him. And there are those who argue that Ulysses is the greatest book in the world. In fact, if you go online, you just Google the best book ever written in human history, James Joyce is up there, okay?
There's certainly an argument for this to be made, but I don't know if I would put it as my top book. It's the fact that you need to do research and the fact that you need to kind of accept that you don't understand it kind of takes a certain enjoyment out of it for me. But I see what he was trying to do and I kind of appreciate it.
Ulysses is either number one or number two on these list of 50 best books in human history. Um, and there are many who tell me, yeah, James Joyce is hard, but if you just spend the time to go over what he's writing and connect the references, you will have a transformative intellectual experience. Okay, it's almost like doing a jigsaw puzzle. Um, and that's all true, okay? But think about what they're saying. They're saying, what they're really saying is that James Joyce believes that he is God. He has the mind of God. And
So what he's saying here is very interesting. You take it in a fascinating point, but it's it's something you like have to devote years and years and years upon. Like it's almost like its own holy book. It's almost interpreted in that kind of way. Like think like the Emerald Tablet was a handful of lines, but there's thousands and thousands, if not millions of pages written about the interpretations of alchemy simply from this singular text. It's the same thing as the Bible. Like the Bible's what I don't know how many few thousand pages, and there are millions, if not billions, of pages of interpretation just about this one book. And that's kind of what he's saying here is that Joyce created something that's so complex, that's so interconnected that it's something that has to be studied to that same level.
If you spend the time to understand what he writes, and it might take you years, decades, okay, you will access the mind of God. That's very different from Dante, which is trying to use poetry to bring people into the mind of God, which is the truth of the world. Okay, Dante is a lot more accessible than James Joyce.
So what he's saying is this is the difference between postmodernism and a more classical writer such as Dante. And really, to broadly define postmodernism, it's just the destruction of symbols, the destruction of tradition, and really, it's essentially Nietzsche's statement, God is dead and man killed him, that the things that once held power in society no longer exist because these symbols have been corrupted, and we're going to build something new. And for a lot of people, it's the destruction of everything. That's where most postmodernism goes wrong. It destroys symbols and doesn't replace them with something better, and that's why you see a lot of nihilistic sort of creations of art, movies, entertainment, books that really don't do anything. That's the more negative side of postmodernism. But there are some interesting works of postmodernism. Again, all of Nietzsche's works are really considered the genesis of postmodernism, and it does have some good criticisms. But for the vast majority of things, it doesn't replace it with something aspirational, and that's really the downfall of it. Like this is the biggest issue a lot of people have with Nietzsche is that he was so good at telling you what was wrong with society and telling you what was wrong with the world, but he wasn't as good at telling you what to replace it with. And I know the Ubermensch, I know the eternal recurrence, I know those main ideas that he talks about are very inspirational, but then you can point to his life and you can say he didn't embody them himself. So in fact, his ideas failed because he couldn't follow it. He couldn't stick with it. And in truth, he lived and died a failure almost. But his legacy he lives on. And these are all discussions that are never ending because there's not really a solid answer. But really, this is what he's trying to say here.
So let's look at the differences. Modern literature, as represented by Ulysses, it is elitist, it's self-referential, okay? It just has a lot of allusions and references, but you actually don't know what the meaning is. Like, what is the bigger story here? And it's uses something called stream of consciousness writing, which is it's trying to capture the mind as it thinks. And
So I don't know if he goes into the detail, but essentially it shifts who's talking. There's no sort of quotations at all. It blurs the line between what is real and what is a dream, what's a daydream, what's a memory, what's actually happening. It shifts to the perspective of the observer so that things are happening, but that person might not notice it because they're focused on something else. All sorts of things in order to try to kind of, as I said earlier, replicate consciousness. That's really the best way to describe Ulysses, is that it's the individual experiences that we all go through, and it's more so about the everyday lives of Dubliners instead of the everyday lives of heroes, which is what the focus of most stories are. And essentially, it's Joyce's attempt to show that the mundane has a sort of mythic side to it.
works, okay? That's different from Homer, who was very democratic. He was trying to bring beauty and truth to the people through epic poetry, okay? So starting with modern literature, we have this abrupt change in the nature of literature. Before, it was about empowering people to seek the truth for themselves.
So essentially, what the Odyssey was it was a religious work or some sort of guiding text before these sorts of ideas existed. It was a poem that was recited time and time again through generations upon generations before writing was something that was more fashionable. And really what it was doing was instilling values into the Greek societies that were reading these things or listening to these things or reading these things when it was just a spoken tradition. And it's very interesting to see the origins of these sort of philosophies and ideas.
Now, modern
What's up,
literature,
Fluffy Kitty? Sorry, I just saw that now.
it's really just this very elite club of very arrogant, haughty people, okay? Um,
That's the best way
James
to describe somebody that likes James Joyce. Like it is very like it's definitely anyone that enjoys James Joyce, myself included, thinks they're smarter than they actually are. I think there's a certain element of that because he certainly felt that way.
Joyce was good friends with Virginia Woolf. In fact, Virginia Woolf actually published James Joyce. In
I have this book. I've been meaning to read it.
1927, Woolf published a book called To the Lighthouse, and it's probably her most famous work. And in it, she's also trying to respond to Joyce. To the Lighthouse, it's very much based on Homer's Odyssey. And um, it's extremely well written, okay? Let's just look at what she writes. There were the eternal problems, suffering, death, the poor. There was always a woman dying of cancer even here. And yet she had said to all these children, you shall go through with it. To 8 people she had sent relentlessly that, and the bill for the greenhouse would be 50 pounds. Okay, so what she's doing is she's reading a book and she's thinking about the issues raised by a book, but she's also thinking about life. Like, oh, I have to go and do something, okay? And that's really how our minds work. So this captures really well stream of consciousness thinking. And
See, once I heard him start talking about this, I was like, I want to pick up this book because when you hear stream of consciousness, you always think of like it's going to be annoying, it's going to be shifting perspective, it's going to be difficult to read, and if it's done well, it could be really interesting, but if it's not done well, it's not that exciting.
she's heavily influenced by Freud, right? She's trying to go into the unconscious and trying to figure out how the unconscious works. The Lighthouse is really about memory, about perception, about remembering. All right. But again, it's extremely self-indulgent, and it's inward-looking, and it's very, and again, it's a radical departure from traditional literature. So let's compare modern literature with Dostoevsky. Remember, before we discussed Dostoevsky. For Dostoevsky, the heart is a deep, impenetrable ocean, and our psychology responds to external events. We live in the world and respond to the world. We must surrender ourselves to others to seek salvation and redemption. We cannot rely on ourselves to forgive ourselves, to love ourselves. We must rely on others.
So interestingly, Dostoevsky is kind of observing the destruction of our symbols, the destruction of meaning and things kind of falling apart. And he predicts a world where you no longer like the people that are near you. You no longer like society. You are isolated. You feel like there is no point to go on. And, really, Dostoevsky's solution is a return to the church, a return to community, a return to value. And I think it's really misinterpreted what he's advocating. People think it's this traditional idea of things, but really what he's saying is that we need actual meaning, we need actual depth, and I don't think he would necessarily agree to the return to old ideas that were limiting in a sense, but he's gonna
We are in a community of people, okay?
compare it with
So these are the
a
truths
more
of Dostoevsky.
postmodern.
When we get to modern literature, self-discovery will allow for self-mastery. Our psychology responds to suppressed memories. We can be our own salvation and redemption.
Okay, so these ideas on their face don't seem necessarily wrong. And I think he's not going to delve into this and he's going to focus on the more negative aspects of this, but really what he's talking about is the selfishness that is kind of accepted more in our modern day and age, that there's this idea that you are the center of the universe, that you are the only thing that matters. And how this kind of breeds more negative aspects and kind of isolates you and stops you from being part of a community. And just think about it this way, like it takes a village. You need other people in your life. Anything great was created because the person that created it or the group that created it was working in tandem with others. Even works of great individual achievement are always backed up by someone that's supporting them, somebody that's helping them along, somebody that's inspiring them, or someone that taught them to be better. And when we kind of get into these more selfish ideals, we kind of ditch this in pursuit of our own sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that we need to do this thing, that this thing is the only thing that matters, and gets us away from the community and the real reason you're doing things in the world, the real reason you're going out and trying to be a better person or trying to make more money or trying to do all these things is so that you could be better for others. And when you're inspiring yourself in that way, then it's productive to society. When you're inspiring yourself just for the sake of yourself, then it's detrimental.
It's too optimistic. It's too positive. Okay? It's saying that, hey, if you're poor, don't worry about it. As long as you think happy thoughts, you'll be good. Okay? This idea of positive psychology, right, that we have today. Carl Jung and Friedrich Sigmund Freud also had a major influence on Pablo Picasso. And you can see it from his painting, Head of a Woman, okay? Now, what you will notice is it's
I wonder if Jung actually influenced it though, because a lot of Jung's writings is solely focused on the symbolism of a mandala, I think it's called, or Mandela. I don't know how to say it. It's said different ways, and it's also translated, so who knows if I'm even saying the right word. And essentially, concentric circles or circles that sort of encompass the idea of wholeness. And Jung thought this was a representation of a healthy conscious, and that imperfect shapes were very difficult for the mind and the unconscious to grasp, and it was a sign of sort of some sort of gap in the conscious and unconscious.
it's a
I don't know how to
cubist
explain it without
portrait
drawing it.
of a woman. But if you look further, it's actually two people as well. Okay, and so what this is doing is it's visually representing the theory of the self as presented by Jung. Okay, so do you see the similarities? Great. Okay, so why is this art spreading throughout the world? Well, I mean, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but let's look at an article, right? Was modern art really a CIA psyop? All right.
If you don't believe these sorts of things, and just read Propaganda by Edward Bernays, and then you kind of see that there's this sort of mindset that the masses are uneducated, and without proper guidance, the masses will not make the best decision for themselves. And this idea is very prevalent in all sorts of media, very prevalent in all sorts of more elitist sort of societies, and these ideas of democracy, that you have to guide the information that people are consuming so that they can be better informed. But in fact, it's not necessarily that idea will never make sense to me, that you need to tell people what to think, or if they think for themselves they might have a bad idea. It's like you should be allowed to make a mistake, you should be allowed to think something that's incorrect, you should be allowed to do something that isn't necessarily in your own best interest, because that's free will. That's essentially how we learn, that's essentially how we overcome. If we are guided and forever given a handout, then we will never learn to be self-sufficient. And in fact, I just revealed the overall intention
So
of it,
this
but
article is from JSTOR, which is a academic journal, very mainstream. And let's read what it writes. In the mid-20th century, modern art and design represented the liberalism, individualism, dynamic activity, and creative risk possible in a free society. Okay? So in other words, right now, the capitalist West is at war with communism. 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, communism is spreading all around the world. It's very popular among people. It calls for collective action. So the capitalist West, the
So if you're not on board with what he's saying, just think for 5 minutes, you don't have to Google this. Like none of this stuff you have to Google. It's just right there in front of you if you actually just think about it and actually just think about the motivations of certain things. But if you don't believe that the things that are popular, the art, the media, the entertainment is in subtle ways affecting you, then why would music that's so degenerate, why would music that's so destructive, that's so arrogant and aggressive and pushing certain ideas, why would it be so prominent? Why would music that is just so awful become so in the mainstream of things? Haven't been watching you for a while. Been really cool. Yeah, no, dude, I love this guy. He's awesome.
powers that be, they're spreading Freud, they're spreading Joyce, they're spreading Wolf, they're spreading Pablo Picasso, they're spreading all this art, this modernist art, in order to create a cult of self. Because if you believe in the cult of the self, if you believe that you are the source of everything, then you're not capable of collective action. Okay? So in many ways, this is a response to the problem posed by communism. And this will be
It's the same thing as like the Hegelian dialectic, where you split groups into this versus that so that they don't come together and see their collective servitude. It's easier to divide and conquer than it is to, attack a united force. And essentially, when you put someone in a bubble and you say that your world is directly because of you, then it makes it so that you can't ask others for help. And really, that's the argument he's making. Have I read any Nabokov? I have heard of him. I have not read anything by him. What should I
obviously
read by him?
most obvious during the Cold War. Okay?
Look
Does
it
that
up
make
right
sense?
now.
All right. So why would that be bad? Why would the cult itself be bad? Well, this is Mikhail Buchanan, and he explains it very well in his writings. Okay, so let's read really quickly what he wrote. Having human in man and freedom above all is a product of a social collective labor. To be free in absolute isolation is an absurdity invented by theologians and metaphysicians who have replaced the society of humans by that of God, their phantom.
So what he's saying here is very interesting too, because when we think of the ideas of freedom, what is freedom? It's self-sufficiency, but like self-sufficiency is isolation in essence. Like complete freedom is living like a monk. You know, you want to buy a house, so you have to ask the bank for a mortgage. You want to, you know, get a job, so you have to work for someone else. So in some way, you're exchanging something you have for what someone else has, and it's this interconnectedness that creates community. And really, what he's saying is like the path of enlightenment is the path of isolation, which there's a very profound thought in this. You could either take it as the esoteric or you could take it as the literal, in that, to be truly free, you have to be away from everyone else. Pale Fire by Nabokov. What's it about? I looked it up on Amazon just now, but I that was the first book that I saw. Because I've seen this name before. I don't know anything about him. Okay, it seems interesting. Whenever the plot is like convoluted like that, I'm probably going to enjoy it. Whenever it tries to do something unique. I really have to read more Russian literature. It's weird. There's a lot of like good Russian literature that came out of some of the most hard times. Synopsis won't do the book justice. Okay, okay. That honestly, what you just said is enough for me to like buy it right now. Like whenever you say you can't explain a book, it's usually a good sign that you should pick it up because it's the things that we can't put simply that affect us in the most profound way. It's like asking somebody like, "Oh, what do you think about Borges?" It's like I don't know where to begin, man. It's very difficult to even start trying to put into words, but there's something there that's very unique.
Say that each person feels free in the presence of God, that is, the presence of absolute emptiness, nothingness. Freedom in isolation, then, is the freedom of nothingness, or indeed the nothingness of freedom, slavery. God, the figment of God, has been historically the moral source, or rather, the moral source of all slaveries. So what he's saying is, the radical turning point in human history is the invention of Christianity, because it gives us the idea of individualism. And we think that's a good thing because we're taught that individualism means free choice, it means freedom. But what he's saying is that's an absurdity. We only have freedom from our community. We only have freedom if others are free around us. If we are free,
So this is a very interesting idea he's saying right here. And I don't know if he's going to get to this point. I don't remember exactly when I first watched this video, but I think it was Manly P. Hall said something that it just always stuck with me what he said. And I might be misquoting him, it might be somebody else, but essentially that, when you get away from the idea of God, that place in your mind that worships something, that venerates something, that holds something in high esteem, that moral code, it comes from somewhere else. And if it doesn't come from God, it comes from an idea of man, which is inherently lesser because it's of this world. It's not of another world. So instead of aspirational, it's just at your level. And it's always difficult to sort of create a system that is just as good. Interesting thought. I think it's from Plato that there's this idea that a philosopher's ultimate desire is to die to become one with the idea of concept. That sounds like something Plato would say. That's really interesting. I mean, in a certain essence, like if you're an artist or a philosopher or a thinker, um, it's only your depth that gives value to your death that gives value to your work. Like Kafka dying gave this mythic kind of height to his work because he was this undiscovered artist that was a failure his entire life, and because of it, um, he in his mind died a failure. He didn't really, but you're reading this work and you're like, how is this guy not discovered while he was alive? It's the same thing with Nietzsche. Nietzsche was pretty much a failure his entire life, was a child prodigy that never really got the recognition he felt he deserved. And, you know, if he was alive when he saw this sort of recognition he has today, then he would be much happier.
but no one else is free, then we are slaves as well. So because individuality prevents us from working with others, from loving others, then that makes us slaves to ourselves. And that allows
I think what you're seeing now, in a lot of people, even people that claim to be religious, they worship like I mean, I guess this is why one of the commandments is don't worship false idols. It's the idea that we're building up these worldly things to be almost a religious thing to worship. Like think of people in politics, like think about people that are really, really into politics. Are they not just a religious fanatic that directs their attention to the news and current events and things of that such, and they're willing to die for it and they're willing to, you know, do things that a sane person really wouldn't do. It's all just religious zealotry. And it's gotten to the point where the state is almost a religion.
for the powers that be in society to better control us. Okay? And so what he's saying is Christianity is a slave religion. All right? It was designed to make us all into slaves. And this will and
And I don't necessarily agree with this take fully. I think a lot of this is really a critique by Nietzsche, but the church that we see is not the church that was created. And he has this very good quote that Jesus was the last Christian. And really what he means by this is that Jesus was the last one that embodied the teachings of Christ. He was the last one that lived like him, where you go to modern day churches and they take sides in politics, they take sides in social issues. Like, there's the chapter in the Bible. I really need to read it. I was meaning to this week, but you know, Satan tempts Jesus with the entire world, and he says, if you join with me, we could rule this entire thing. And he says, my kingdom is not of this world. Like it's kind of a very shallow take, but I get what he's saying with the interpretations of it. I think in the secular world, the absence of religion has been filled with science and the state. Yeah, yeah. Is that the quote? The last Christian died on the cross. That's so much better than the one I just said. Wow. Where were you like 2 seconds ago? But yeah, there's this weird idea like that science is infallible and that it's always correct and that there's no such thing as a study that can be corrupted and in any way affected. And it's like the entire point of science is to question, and it's just so ironic how high people hold it in esteem because you're not supposed to have that kind of fervent respect for authority. The entire idea of science is to question. This professor sucks. It's literally intellectually optimized brain rot. I don't know. I just think he's not. I don't like his takes on this topic, but usually he's pretty good. Your stream's behind. I mean, the stream's always going to be behind.
Buchanan lived in the 19th century, but if he read Freud, then he would also argue that the cult of psychoanalysis, it's really about entrapping yourself in your own emotions.
And think about what psychology replaced. Psychology has just replaced the church. You used to go to your priest for guidance. You used to go to your priest for inspiration. You would confess your sins to absolve your psyche. All his takes suck. I mean, I guess you could say that. I don't think so, but I mean, I think he's some good
As for
good
us,
things he
we want
says.
neither phantoms nor nothingness but living human reality. And we recognize that man can feel free, be free, and therefore can achieve freedom. In order to be free, I need to see myself surrounded by free men, and be recognized as such by them. I am free only when my individuality, reflected in the mirror of the equally free consciousness of every individual around me, comes back to me strengthened by everyone's recognition. Okay?
Yeah, I agree with that. He has his questionable moments. But that's the thing, like, if you agree with somebody, what's the point in talking to them? There's no point. It's when you disagree, that's when you learn. That's when you are challenged. That's when your ideas come into question. But the thing is, are you not taking everything everyone says with a grain of salt? Like why would you ever accept anything blindly? I mean, he could be. You know what I mean? He probably is to a certain degree. Like, who cares though?
So what he's saying is this: if you want to be happy, if you want to be free, care about others.
He's also talking about James Joyce, so like who like how is like who like what propaganda is going to affect me and make me believe something that's not like it is what it is. I think this idea that you can't listen to someone because they're clearly propaganda, everything's propaganda. In a certain way, everything's salesmanship. Like again, read Bernays' propaganda. It's essentially the blueprint for all of modern day social media and culture and all sorts of things that there needs to be a spin on everything and there needs to be a sort of kind of massaging of the message being put out.
Be kind to others. Work with other people. Sacrifice your own self-interest for the self-interest for the greater good. Okay, that is what will make you really happy, and that's generally true because think about this. Okay, if you're by yourself, will you be happy? Probably not. But if you have a family, You have kids, you don't have any freedom, but you're a happier person. In many ways, you're a more free person because you have better control of your emotions. You have more purpose in life. All right, so let's bring this to the present day, social media. What social media is, it is the
Read the comments on his videos. I will next time. I don't want to like
democratization of
derail
the
it too
cult of the
much,
self.
but I believe it.
Before, only the wealthy could enjoy the cult of the self, right? Only the wealthy could take the time to self-indulge. But now with social media, everyone can participate in the cult of the self. And that has led to a global epidemic of depression, okay? So look at year 2015. You see this huge spike in depressive symptoms because 2015 is the year when we had access to smartphones, right? So now young people
I think there's so many more. It's certainly a factor, like the need to project your life on social media and say, "Oh, I'm so important because I'm with this person," or "I'm so important because I have this or this or this," and that need to like kind of project like this perfect self is certainly very detrimental. But I think there's so many other factors as to these sorts of statistics, and I think it's difficult to cite things.
feel they can't do anything right. Life is not useful.
Yeah, Sam, I was thinking like uh maybe a month ago, a few weeks ago, I'm like, I haven't seen Sam in so long. Where's he been at? Like I was like, did he just abandon me? It's crazy. But nice to see you here.
And I do not enjoy life. Okay, this huge spike, which has led to a huge spike in suicide. All right, and this is happening throughout the world, not only in North America and Europe, but also in Latin America and East Asia as well. So the cult of the self, which originated in Europe, has now conquered the world through technology. All right. So um,
We'll go to another video. I think this will be more interesting. Hopefully you enjoy this, Sam. Because hopefully this is what I think it is. Time zones. What time is it right now? Tell me the time difference and I'll try to be a little better. Is it better for me to do it earlier in the day or later? Because I know there's people that I always get this like I'll do it at a different time. People be like, why don't you do it this time? So I'll put that in consideration when I do it. If you I'm at college right now. No,
okay,
I'm
that's the
not.
logic of bureaucrats. How do I justify my existence by doing as little work as possible? Okay? So this sounds strange, but let me tell you a story. This is a true story. I'm in Toronto
You know
with
for
my
sure
two
there's
boys,
better professors.
and I let them run around the park. Okay?
This guy's a high school teacher. Like I don't. I think maybe that's why you don't like it. 'Cause he's teaching the high schoolers. It's not like he's teaching like. But again, I don't think there's like very few professors that are worth listening to. I think a lot of them are just kind of the thing I guess I like about him is that he dumbs down the topic in a way that like doesn't he's not trying to teach for the sake of sounding smart. And I think a lot of I mean, he's also you could clearly tell English isn't his first language. I think that has to be a consideration as well. He's doing a pretty good job.
And we've been doing this for 2 months. So I trust him. One of my boys, he's 4 years old, he runs too far, and I lose track of him. Okay? A stranger finds him and
Why are
starts
you such
talking
a
to him.
hater,
But
Professor
my boy
Jiang?
doesn't speak any English. So people now surround my boy, like, where are your parents? And he is scared because he doesn't speak any English. So he faints. Okay, that's what he does. He faints to protect himself. So they call the police, and they call the paramedics. They come and they make sure he's all right. Okay, now I find him. Okay, and now the police interview me, they interrogate me, and I explain to him what happened.
I feel like this story's not doing. I feel like you're just watching this, Sam, and shaking your head.
And at this point, they just let us go home, right? But they insist on taking us to the hospital. I'm like, if we go to a hospital, we can be stuck there for like 12 hours. We can be in line, and like the paramedics, the MAT has already told us there's something wrong with him. Okay, it's not heat stroke, he just fainted, but he's fine. His vital signs are fine. But the police kept on insisting. Meanwhile, there's a fight going on at the park. Okay? And I'm thinking to myself, why are you guys bothering me?
The solution. I knew you were gonna say something. The problem with like most of society is that I hate to say it, but it's lawyers. It's that like there was a huge lawsuit, so you have to have certain procedures to protect you from liability. Because if you don't have these procedures and follow these procedures, then you're liable for a negligence claim. And it's very unfortunate that that's how society works, is that you're almost punished because someone was an idiot in the past.
And not going to arrest those guys who are fighting somewhere else? And the answer is because it's easier to deal with me than it is to go arrest those guys. Okay? That's how bureaucrats think. They're always thinking of ways to justify their existence, but
So the story, I don't know if the story really showed that, but there is something to bureaucracy about needing to justify its existence. Think about a manager that has salesmen that are doing really good. Like, why do you need a manager? What do they do? Like, there's always that underlying thought that like I need to in some way show how I am useful, how I'm in some way benefiting others. And this is wiki brain. I've never heard that. I've heard like Reddit brain. I haven't heard Wikipedia brain. See, Wikipedia is like so terrible now. Like the only thing it's good for is if you don't know anything about the person and you want to literally just know one thing about them. But aside from that, it's god awful.
not do real work. Okay, and that's
Was it ever good? I'm trying to remember. 'Cause like when I was a kid, I used to go to it and I would get what I needed, but like I have no idea. I'm picking out good points, but tell me how this relates to his first proposition. Well, it's not even that, dude. It's not even that. It's the CIA has like a lot of control on the thing. So I'm pretty sure it's proven. Like when I say stuff like this, I'm like, I don't know if like I sound crazy saying this, or you could literally just look up a lot of this stuff, how much control intelligence agencies have over the internet. I feel like I always use that as like people definitely think I'm saying it as a cop out, but
the message of the trial. Eventually, society becomes so bureaucratic that the bureaucrats only think about how.
so he's talking about Kafka's The Trial, which that's not really Kafka's The Trial is essentially about how a guy goes on trial for a crime that he doesn't even know what he did, and he ultimately ends up being sentenced to death for it. And the entire time, there's so much bureaucracy and there's so much just passing the ball off to somebody else that he can never find information. He can never tell his side of the story. Everyone in some way has some sort of ego investment into this trial that you can never get to the truth of it, and he can never be proclaimed innocent because if somebody goes free, then that looks bad on the judge, that looks bad on the judge's employees, then it looks bad on this person and the cop, and then this, and then this. And it's like whenever there's some sort of society that's based on the idea of justice, is it real justice, or are we in some way subtly affecting things? Well, isn't the point of the stream entertainment to a certain degree? I don't know. I like his videos because I can riff off it pretty well. I mean, yeah, you're
How to
making
make
very good
problems
arguments. Yeah, I'm
for
not
ordinary
disagreeing with you.
citizens. Because life becomes easier for them. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Let's move on to The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt is one of the 20th century's most powerful intellectuals. And she's writing about how Nazism came to dominate Germany, now communism came to dominate Soviet Russia, and
Sounds like an
how
interesting
these two
book.
regimes led to the deaths of tens of millions of people. How they started World War II, how they created the Holocaust, how they created the famine, okay? And in her book, she says that these two regimes are religious cults. They're evil cults. And they have three defining characteristics. Okay? The first
The thing about like whenever you talk about like, oh, this civilization or this, like, it's all kind of the same. It's it's very weird how we like think that this level of control is unique to this point of history, but just think back to the Inquisition. Think back to when if you said the wrong interpretation of God, you were put to the stake, and it's very weird.
first is
It's
that they're removed from reality. They don't care about reality. They have
Sam is
a
such a
religion,
hater.
they have a faith, they have
It's
a
so
mindset,
funny. I
and they want to
love it.
impose their faith on reality. Okay, they don't care about reality. They're removed from reality. That's the first thing, okay?
He's gonna relate totalitarianism and bureaucracy to the idea of doing work for the sake of justifying it. You know, you have some sort of statistics. Think about like we've all been at a company or we've all worked for a place where somebody uses a buzzword like KPI and they think it holds some weight. Like I've been in so many meetings that I did not need to be in, listening to somebody say KPI, and they thought this was going to be some profound statement that everyone in the room would light up and clap their hands, and it's just like who who cares? It's so stupid. You're going to get dinner, that's crazy, and you're not putting me in the car. That's insane. I have never felt so betrayed.
Second thing is that when you're removed from reality, your only logic is movement, expansion. Okay? You only know if you're right if you're growing. Okay, so if the Nazis, their faith, their religion
So I seriously I don't what is it? I don't know what that point's trying to make.
would lead to the destruction of Germany, but their membership was increasing. So they were right. They were winning these wars against European countries, therefore they're right. Okay? They cannot use logic to explain their actions, so they use movement to justify their actions. Okay? That's number two. 1 and 2 means number 3, which is the Nazis and the Soviets hated reality. They defied reality. They fought against reality. So even though the Nazis were losing the war, even though it's clear they could not defeat the Soviet Russia, they doubled down.
I genuinely have no idea where he's going. We might we might have to skip. We'll go a little bit further.
Time, 3 can apply to all bureaucracies, all governments, meaning that over time, all governments, all bureaucracies will tend towards totalitarianism because that's the only way they can justify their existence. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about this concretely. Okay, what do I mean by this? So this is a book by James Scott. It's an excellent book, by the way, called Seeing Like a State. And he's trying to explain to us how bureaucracies work, how governments function. And for him, governments actually
All right, I feel like this is going nowhere. We'll find something more interesting. Um, we'll talk about what you have to say, Sam, though. Let me pause it. This isn't all work meaningless until you or society confirms meaning to it. Yeah. I mean that's really just Schrodinger's cat. It's that, observation breeds existence. Like, dude, most of the people that are online are psyops. Like, it really doesn't you know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying. It's just I think that's like a bad argument to make because, essentially everyone that you watch online that's big is in some way trying to sell you something, in some way trying to push you in a certain direction. It's like maybe it's bad in the grand scheme of things, but like who cares? Please don't put this guy again. Damn, last time you guys loved him, but let's see what's suggested. Only Professor Jiang is suggested. Hold on, let me find something to watch. I'll find something quick, don't worry.
This video is sponsored by
Everyone
Shortform.
drinking the
If you're looking
haters.
to engage more with the world's best nonfiction books, but feel overwhelmed or limited by time, Shortform makes reading more manageable if your annual plan. Somehow, hints of your arms, legs,
This is Pursuit of Wonder, pretty good channel, by the way.
torso, and head began to grow. Slowly at first, then quickly. It was a moment in time when you were nothing more than a fetus. A soft, supple, and helpless arrangement of gelatin-like flesh.
Alright,
Contained within is the nature of your body and the world, known as abjection.
okay. I can tell this is not going to be interesting. Put on Michael Sandel. I can't spell. The Tyranny of Merit. It seems interesting. Whenever I see TED Talk, though, I'm just like, I, genuinely, I always just shake my head. It's
Here's a question we should all be asking. What went wrong? Not just with the pandemic, but with our civic life. What brought us to this polarized, rancorous political moment? In recent decades, the divide between winners and losers has been deepening, poisoning our politics, setting us apart. This divide is partly about inequality, but it's also about the attitudes toward
what kind of philosopher is this guy? Can you summarize him?
winning and losing that have come with it. Those who landed on top came to believe that their success was their own doing, a measure of their merit, and that those who lost
This is
out
interesting. Okay.
had no one to blame but themselves.
I thought, dude, with the intro, I thought this was gonna be very dumb, but I see where he's going with it, and it's interesting. So essentially, he's saying that the people that lose blame others, and the people that win blame themselves.
This way of thinking about success arises from a seemingly attractive principle. If everyone has an equal chance, the winners
This video's off
deserve
topic for
their
him.
winnings. This is the heart of the meritocratic ideal. In practice, of
Go
course,
back to his justice
we
quote.
fall far.
This 50 minutes. See, the good thing about Professor Zhang is that everything's clipped, so I know it's gonna be interesting. This one's a short one. This is good.
Still bears the
So this was an idea that I don't think was as accepted. I think it's more accepted now, but really what he's asking is Jung's unconscious, collective unconscious, is that something that we should be bound by? And in a certain sense, yes. In a certain sense, no. It's what I would say. Boring. I just don't agree with this lady. Sam, you're really destroying the moment. The entire like Kant's big philosophy was that you didn't need a moral system from God. So of course he's going to reject any sort of collective. metaphysical idea because uh, you're his whole point was trying to get away from this idea. I don't know. I need to read more of Kant's to argue, but we'll go back. We
Funding for this program is provided by
what is even playing?
additional funding provided by
This video is sponsored by the visual learning app Imprint. Discover life-changing insights from philosophy. Simultaneously one of the most cynical and hopeful thinkers in history, Blaise Pascal was a scientific genius brought to spiritual extremes, a morbidly sensitive, neurotic-like mind with the eloquence of a poet, and a theologian who saw God, reason, and meaning, fear, misery, and hope, all in a strange dance where they never quite touch, but always move in lockstep, striving toward a display of redemption.
I don't know much about this guy. God. Didn't mean to open it here.
Wawa's $5 big breakfast deal gets you any sizzly,
it-
any coffee, and a hash brown for $5.
Okay, we can watch
Gotta
this.
have a Wawa.
Get more control with great tires at great price.
Hold on, let me switch it. To your premium account. We'll just watch this. I don't know anything about Pascal, so I don't. We were watching Professor Jiang. I think he's interesting. Sam does not. He does not like him.
Yet they don't have all the component parts of Socratic philosophy. They usually lack the wit. They almost always lack the poetry. Occasionally they absorb some of the ethical doctrines.
Yeah,
or
we shouldn't listen to
epistemological
Sam's
doctrines,
recommendations.
But the ones who come after Socrates never really live up to the Socratic ideal. The three main fragments that Socratic philosophy breaks into are called Stoicism, Epicureanism, and skepticism. And these are the most important Hellenistic outgrowths from Socratic philosophy. And since Rome, the Roman Empire in particular, is the political entity which ultimately dominates the Mediterranean basin and absorbs and inherits the tradition of Greek philosophy, most of the
One of the philosophies I really want to read more about is Epicureanism. I think that's how you say it. It seems so like out there and weird that like I just know I'm gonna enjoy it. There's like three philosophers I know that Nietzsche liked: Heraclitus, Emerson, and Epicurus. So like there's definitely something in there that I'm gonna enjoy.
Hellenistic branches of philosophy are developed in connection or with reference to
This
either
this
politically.
you can tell he knows what he's talking about, so you can tell it's gonna be interesting. I don't know if we're gonna react to all of it. I might pull up something else, or I might stop streaming at a certain point, but we'll give it a
or
little bit.
intellectually with
You're on
Roman
thin ice
culture.
though with your suggestions.
And the first of these developments is hedonism or Epicureanism, named after a guy named Epicurus. And what Epicureanism says is that pleasure is the only good, and that the happy man is the one that has a great many pleasures, but no corresponding pains. And there is potentially a way of deriving that from Socratic philosophy. If you would take the idea of Socratic prudence, the man who drinks a little bit in order to get a certain degree of pleasure, but then not so much as he will cause himself a hangover or cause himself some corresponding pain, he's being prudently Socratic, picking and choosing his pleasures in such a way that he does not generate any corresponding pains. You can see possibly how people who were not entirely developed to who were not.
So what I find interesting about Epicurus is that like he had a very radical way about living his life in that he kind of just bought a giant piece of land and just lived on it and kind of did his own thing.
Entirely committed to the Socratic conception of the soul and of virtue might want to derive that sort of justification for the pursuit of pleasure from the Socratic dialogues. A second alternative, again a minor alternative, fragment of Socratic philosophy is called skepticism. Socrates, throughout most of the dialogues, I would emphasize the word most rather than all, says that he doesn't know anything. Part of the Socratic irony is this posture of acting as if he's really an ignorant man when in fact he is wise, in saying that he knows nothing and thus never trying to teach people by directly making declarative sentences. For the most part, Socrates teaches by question and answer. Socrates helps people to...
This is why we don't really have any actual works of Socrates. Everything we know about Socrates is one through firsthand account and through other philosophers and then through Plato's dialogues. And we don't even know if Plato was accurate in how he described Socrates. He could have just built him up to be this somewhat dramatized character, or he could have been very accurate. And I always like to think about that idea because I find it very interesting.
articulate and to realize what's already buried within their soul. When Socrates does that, when he's in that skeptical mode, he says, I myself know nothing, all I do is inquire into things. I'm the eternal inquirer. I'm the patron saint of rational inquiry. And it's possible to see, particularly within the context of the Roman Empire, how skepticism might develop from that Socratic stance of knowing nothing. Remember that the Roman Empire is a heterogeneous mix of peoples and cultures and religions and philosophical positions. And after being forced to encounter one cosmogonic myth after another, one theory of religion after another, one theory of morals after another, sophisticated Romans, sophisticated Hellenistic thinkers might well come to the conclusion that Lucian the skeptic did, which is that no one really knows the right path.
I think that's a very interesting point. I never thought of it in that context, applying Socratic method to Roman conquest. But there certainly is something to it, and I don't know if this is where they got this from, but that is exactly what Alexander the Great did. When Alexander the Great conquered a society, he dressed up like their local garb and kind of celebrated their gods and kind of embraced their gods. And in some way, this kind of gave him a rapport with the local people. Machiavelli talks about this in The Prince. Makes you think of the foundations of Western intellect, how fragile it actually is when you... Dude, the weirdest part about Western philosophy is that it comes from the East, because all these people kind of date back to Pythagoras, who was taught Eastern mysticism essentially.
Path. No one even knows if there is a right path. The best we can do is say that the pretensions made by the various schools of philosophy are just that, pretensions. Skepticism, while it may be rather negative, is at least right. We can be certain about what we do not know. Right? And it's possible to see how someone, especially someone that was terribly frustrated with the attempt to obtain final absolute knowledge, might resort to skepticism as a kind of easy way out, a way of avoiding the burden of Socratic inquiry. The third and most important development in Hellenistic philosophy is called Stoicism. And Stoicism is probably the greatest and most interesting achievement of the Hellenistic philosophers. And while it never achieved...
I find it the most boring. Like I don't like to build structures. I don't like to build systems. I like to kind of apply a framework and have sliding scales. And I think Stoicism is too systematic in its approach and too boring in its application. You know, everything you can gain from Stoicism, you can gain from Taoism. I think it loses the paradox and the poetry and the sort of inspirationalness of it.
achieves the poetic and intellectual grandeur of the Socratic
That's why I study
synthesis,
law.
of the Platonic overarching system which makes statements about the entire human condition. Stoicism is, in fact, a noble philosophy, an excellent philosophy for silver men, for those spirited men in the Republic who are going to be our guardians. It's an excellent philosophy for military men. It's an excellent philosophy for people that...
Stoicism is great for engineers and physicists. I think I don't know, for whatever reason, it just doesn't resonate with me. But like, my favorite philosopher is Emerson. So no philosophical system is going to be like I'm going to be gung ho about. I think I think you have the rational side of life. I think you have the expressive side of life, and to me, Emerson is the combination of both.
That are going to be practical politicians if they intend to be virtuous, if they intend to pursue the public good. And Stoicism is characterized by a rejection of pleasure as the standard of human happiness and human felicity. Stoicism takes the position that the wise man, the good man, the philosopher, is a man who lives in accordance with nature. He fears only abdicating his moral responsibility. He is not afraid of pain. He is not afraid.
See, to me, this is just Emerson, but not as exciting. Here's Camus. Dude, I love Camus too. I really do enjoy him. The thing about Camus, though, is like, to me, I think him and Kafka are very similar. And I just, Kafka to, like, I enjoy reading Kafka much more. Like, I'm at the point where I've read enough philosophy where I don't really want to read more. And I'd rather just get it in a story. I'd rather just get it through a tale instead of just this is how you have to think. This is this, then prove this. Like I'm bored with the argumentative side of philosophical writing. That's why I enjoy Nietzsche because he just says it. He just is like, this is what I believe. I am correct. Ignore everyone else and have a good day. Well, you wouldn't say have a good day. You would say like fuck you, but like, you get what I'm saying. If you look at the lives of the two, yeah, that's true. I mean, didn't Camus have a sad end too? He died in a a car crash, kind of in his prime of his writing. I have the book that was found with him. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. The First Man, I think it's called, like this semi autobiographical work. And I haven't picked it up. I haven't picked up anything by Camus in a very long time. Maybe you're reminding me. He really wasn't. He went to a lot of brothels, we'll say.
Afraid of death. He is not afraid of poverty. He is not afraid of any of the vicissitudes of the human condition. He fears only that he should let himself down and that he should be less than a complete human being. According to the Stoics, and there are a number of Stoics, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that actually develop the doctrine, but all the doctrines are quite similar. The only matter of concern to a wise and philosophic individual is the things completely under your control. You can't control the movements of the sun and the planets. You can't control whether a leaky ship sinks or makes it to port. You can't control the weather. You can't control other people.
No, that is not Camus. What? Who are you talking about lives in the desert? I'm so confused. No, Camus was like a playboy philosopher basically. He was very popular. He was very charismatic. Women loved him.
You
Definitely
can't
didn't have a
control the
hunchback.
society around you. There's only one thing, and
Unless I'm
one thing
wrong,
only
maybe
that
I'm
you are
wrong.
in control of, and that is you, your will, your intentions, yourself. In other words, the wise man, the truly philosophical man, is the man who is entirely in
No,
control of his own.
Kafka was a man that was afraid to express love because he had a really bad relationship with his father. And I think it gave his writing this kind of rejection and this need to be accepted, but this kind of acceptance that it would never be.
Soul, who takes utter and complete moral responsibility for his actions and is indifferent to everything else, not because he doesn't care about other people, not because he doesn't care about the felicity of the entire human species, but because it's not under his control. There's no use wondering or worrying.
I think it's different though because Kafka wasn't like sure he was a failed artist, but he wasn't really I guess you could say he was a failure in life, but he was like middle class. He was an attorney. It's probably I just don't like that word because I think it's just like so like what is it 2013? Like it's also just a weird insult. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's such a weird thing to like. That word to me has like a lot of projection in it because it's like why do you base your life off of that metric. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
about what tomorrow will bring, since tomorrow isn't under your control. Do what's right today and let tomorrow take care of itself. The Stoic philosopher is the man who has liberated himself from fear. He's not afraid of death. He's not afraid of pain. He's not afraid of other people's dismissal as a fool. The only thing he cares about is that he should meet his moral obligations. Ralph Waldo
Sam, please explain this. He's about to talk about Emerson, so we're gonna let him keep talking.
Emerson once said that greatness is the perception that virtue is enough, which is an elegant and beautiful line, and he might well have stolen.
That is a very good quote. My favorite Emerson quote is, actually I have a bunch, but money often costs too much. And then another one I like by him is, every wall is a door.
That from one of the Stoics, because all of the Stoics basically believe
You'll
that
get the nuance
virtue,
update tomorrow.
moral virtue, an organized soul which pursues rationally the ends which are good for all human beings. That's the Stoic conception of virtue. They finally understand their greatness consists in the fact that they perceive that virtue is enough. We do not need wealth. We do not need sexual gratification. We do not need life itself. If moral virtue tells us that we must die in the pursuit of some good end, the protection of our family, the protection of our home, the protection of the innocent, in the doing of right, nothing should be spared, not even our lives. The Stoic wise man is a man who...
This guy's winning me over to Stoicism right now. I do have to agree. I think it's because he quoted Emerson, though.
Who has trained his soul, trained his mind, so that he is not afraid of apparent evils. He is only afraid of real evil. He is afraid of losing control of his soul. He is afraid of being a slave to lust.
Seneca, who's my favorite Stoic philosopher. Seneca has a very interesting life, but basically he has this quote, and I gotta paraphrase it because I don't remember it exactly, but we suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality. And this is an idea that I always come back to because I'll always find myself stressing out about something that really doesn't matter, stressing out about something that really hasn't come to fruition, that might not even ever occur. And then I think about it for 2 seconds and I'm like, you're playing out imaginary scenarios instead of just actually doing something about it. Like what's the point in worrying for the sake of worrying? What's the point in worrying about something that might not actually happen? Whereas you have this problem right now and you could start, taking step one and then step two and then step three. But instead you're petrified in fear of something that doesn't exist and it's just a figment of your imagination.
To desire, to emotion. The Stoic man is the honorable philosopher, the man who stands at his duty and is steadfast and serious-minded. In living according to nature, what the Stoic philosopher does is examine the nature of the human condition and the nature of the world around
I'll
us.
see you, Sam.
He discerns his position in nature. He discerns the kind of creature that he is. And
He's cracking me up every time you say it.
he
Thanks for
lives
being
in
here,
such a
though.
way as not to disgrace himself, as not to be less than what he truly could be. He won't live the swinish life that we found with Aristophanes. He wants to be, if not a god, certainly not less than human. He won't be an animal either. He will live up to the fullest potentials that human being has to offer. Now, among the Roman Stoics, two are especially noteworthy. One is Epictetus, and one is Marcus Aurelius. And one of the wonderful ironies about the history...
I'm shocked you didn't say Seneca. Seneca was very important as well. Perfect drunk to tiredness ratio. I didn't even read all of it. You shouldn't have said anything, dude. Now I'm on to you. I'm shocked you didn't say Seneca's because Seneca was right, unless I'm getting it wrong, but I'm pretty sure Seneca was a advisor to Nero, I want to say. It's Nero or Caligula. Yeah, he was Nero. And Nero accused him of creating a plot on the emperor. He was probably innocent. And one of there's this very, very famous story that he was made to drink poison, I think. I forget how they took him out, but basically he, in the moment of death, didn't allow Nero and the people that condemned him to death to get any satisfaction, and he just took it like a champ.
History of philosophy is that Epictetus was a slave and Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. And philosophy is the great equalizer. Both the slave and the emperor can equally well participate in a philosophy that is accessible to all human beings as human beings. There's nothing less conscious of social status than philosophy.
Marcus Aurelius cites Epictetus a lot in his meditations.
Wise man, a man who is disciplined, in control of his motions, and follows the way of nature, can be a good man no matter what his position in the social structure is. He is not responsible for the social structure, and it is not his problem. If the gods or nature or whatever is controlling the world makes you a slave, then be a good slave. If God or nature or whatever is controlling the world makes you an emperor, then be a good one. Your job is not to disgrace yourself and live up to the highest potentials of human being.
It's like, to me, this, how do I phrase this? Like this really just sounds like Taoism, but it kind of takes like it puts an emphasis on the material too much for me, where I'm more interested in the esoteric. I'm more interested in the heart and the soul and the fulfillment and purpose of things. Whereas, you could be a stoic and you could be an emperor. Whereas my way of life is that I don't need anything to make me happy. The external world doesn't dictate my internal world. The world doesn't, even though I exist because I don't participate in it. And I think just that's the real disillusionment I have with Stoicism, is that it wishes for worldly accomplishments where I don't necessarily think that's a necessary thing.
The most interesting of the Stoics is Marcus Aurelius. Lord Acton, the great English
That's weird.
philosopher,
I find him
and
the least. I find Marcus Aurelius the least interesting, and it's not even that I think he's the least interesting. I just think that Meditations is more of a manual for him to live a good life. And in some way, this makes it a very easy book to read and easy philosophy to digest because it's meant to be a sort of manual. But to me, he's the least interesting because he doesn't express his philosophy in a way where he's trying to convince you, he's trying to win you over, he's trying to put some artistic flair into it. And I see the benefit because he's honest and he's upfront, and that's endearing as well. But to me, it's not as fun to read as it is to read Emerson or to read Nietzsche. There's not the poetic kind of side of things. Yeah, I would agree. Seneca is my favorite. Seneca is like Letters from a Stoic. I need to read the other stuff that he wrote, but Letters to a Stoic, or is it Letters to a Stoic or Letters from a Stoic? I forget. It's probably Letters from a Stoic, but it's just so funny that these people are like asking him for advice, and he's just giving the most old man grandpa advice ever, and it's so interesting. Yeah, discourse is definitely more interesting, and I definitely agree. Like, and I see why people like Meditations, but for me, I just like I love poetry. So like, if you're going to tell me a philosophical idea, do it with some artistry, do it with some expression, do it with some, allegory, simile, or metaphor. Like do it in a fun way where I can use my imagination. Don't lay it out in front of me because anything that's mundane is going to be boring to me.
Historian once said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's generally speaking true. The difficulty with that generalization is Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was an absolute ruler. He was a ruler of the Roman Empire. He was an emperor. He had absolute power of life and death over everyone in the known world. I don't mean everyone in the world as we know it today, but everyone in the world as the Romans would have known it. They don't know about China or have a very attenuated conception of the Eskimos. For them, the world is the Mediterranean basin, and Rome owns it. And Marcus Aurelius owns Rome, essentially. His word is
I think Marcus Aurelius's life is more interesting than his philosophy. Like it's almost more inspirational that he was a well-mannered emperor because you look at some of the other emperors such as Caligula, such as Nero, such as what are the other bad ones? Claudius, Tiberius. There's a whole list of terrible emperors that were very wicked people, and then you have a well-mannered one. So it almost makes it more interesting than anything he wrote.
law. Now, for almost all the Roman emperors, they lived scandalous lives and they disgraced themselves. They were much more concerned with indulging their sensual appetites, satisfying their passions, flying into rages. Marcus Aurelius is the standing exception to that, and the exception to Lord Acton's generalization. In his case, power didn't corrupt. Absolute power did not corrupt absolutely. Instead, absolute power allowed us to see what the man underneath the body is really like.
Lincoln has a good quote about this as well, and it's something along the lines of any man can endure hardship. If you want to see the true test of a man, give him power and see what he does with it. And I think I like that one better personally, but
It allowed us to find out what Marcus Aurelius' soul is like. Imagine a man for whom all the restraints of law and custom and political order are taken away. He can have whatever he wants. If a man under those circumstances behaves well, you know something about the soul underneath because no external constraint is making him do what he is doing. And Marcus Aurelius is the one example of an absolute ruler who behaves himself in such a way as not to disgrace himself. It's an
I can't think of a single other one. But again, this could all just be legend, and who knows? Like, who knows if he was a good person or a bad person? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's no videos of him. There's no record of him aside from this one thing. Obviously, there's the historical accounts, but I don't even trust the news. So,
an amazing temptation. Imagine what it's like. Stop and put yourself in that place for a second. Marcus Aurelius takes the throne in 161 AD and he dies in 180 AD. 19 years controlling the entire world. He can have all the money in the world. That's not an exaggeration. All the money in the world. If he wants it, he can just collect it all. He can have sex with anyone he wants, whenever he wants, under any circumstances.
this guy's thinking about it way too much. This is just his fantasy now.
If he wants to get drunk, he can have wine brought in by the boatload. Infinitely, forever. He can go on a drunk now and stay drunk for the next 19 years until he dies. Imagine anything that the bronze, desiring, emotional, irrational parts of your souls want. And now imagine that you can have it. Now, under those circumstances, imagine that you are forced to bear with this human condition for 19 long years. Now, ask.
I don't know why he's like embellishing it so much. Would you rather have a well-functioning monarchy or a badly functioning democracy? I mean, it depends. It really depends. Um, the obvious answer is here is well-functioning, but you know what I mean? Like it's I don't know. I don't know because there's no such thing as a free lunch. Like you might have a well-functioning monarchy today, but who is the kid? Is he a spoiled little brat? Is it going to be King Joffrey from Game of Thrones? Like, there's all sorts of concerns. And again, is there even any difference between government, or is it all just kind of a sort of oligarchy? Because I think a monarchy just resembles an oligarchy, and a democracy at a certain point, I mean, at all points, resembles an oligarchy. So who's to say there's even a difference? I mean, you know, he wants that. No, he's definitely like, I mean, if I was in a lecture, I would certainly go into these details, but we're watching a video, so you don't really need to embellish as much. But if you're in person, he's making a very profound point about this philosophy was so strong that it could temper the wildest fantasies of man. And that's really the point he's making. And it's he's doing it well. It's just I'm just making jokes
Ask
about it.
yourself, and you didn't give a show of hands, but stop and think about it for a minute. How many of you would fail to disgrace yourselves? To tell you the truth, I don't think that I could meet the challenge. If you're honest about it and you stop and think about what kind of a man it takes to bear up under those circumstances, I think you'll have to admit, or at least
Dude, I would just not want to be like I would not want to be king. Like this, you know how many meetings you would have to go to? You know how much bullshit you would have to deal with? Like I can't stand clerical work. I can't stand like, oh, you gotta sign this form, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. Like you have to go to this ceremony. I would not do it. I would give up after day one. I all power to you if you want responsibility, but I don't want any.
I'll have to admit that he's a better man than I am. And that in this respect, over the centuries, Marcus Aurelius serves as a standing reproach to our self-indulgence, a standing reproach to the idea that we are unable to deal with the circumstances of human life. If you can deal with temptation at that level, I cannot imagine what is outside the human potential. And for the Stoics, we must remember that any virtue which is accessible to any human being is in principle accessible to all of us. We all have a rational nature which allows us to control our feelings, control our behavior, control our connection to other people.
This is something Emerson said. I think he puts it best, but jealousy is just denying your gift of humanity. And really what he's saying there is that the accomplishment of somebody else proves that it's possible to all of us. So in tearing others down, you're tearing yourself down because you're denying your own capacity to take the same actions, to do the same things, to achieve the same thing.
Compared to Marcus Aurelius, we have tiny little temptations. We're tempted to steal a little thing. We're tempted to cheat on our income taxes. We're tempted to cheat on our spouses. Marcus Aurelius has that sort of temptation
Just
magnified
admitting what he does wrong.
1,000-fold. And he consistently does good stuff. Stop and think about this for a minute. This is no common man. This is not like the rest of us, and I don't know how he did it. Maybe he did it through philosophy, but, well, it remains to be seen.
He's leaving out the big reason. Obviously, he had a good belief system. Obviously, he had a good, uh, you know, philosophy to live by. But he was also tutored by some of the best emperors, and he was basically like groomed from a very young age to become a ruler. So a lot of his existence was studying and learning and seeing how a ruler lived and seeing how a ruler did things properly. And he almost embraced this responsibility. He was almost bred to be this great emperor. And I think he's leaving it out because there was a lot of people that were helping him become this person. He had tutors. He had his entire life to devote to this one singular purpose. So, given enough time and given enough openness, you can really do anything.
Marcus is the last of the good emperors. He's the last of the Antonines.
I think Hadrian selected him. And then another guy was after him, and then he was emperor. I don't remember exactly when he became emperor. I think he wasn't that young. I think he was somewhat middle-aged for our standards, probably old for their standards.
And emperors. And the emperors that come before him are, generally speaking, okay. They're not as bad as the ones that come after. But Marcus is perhaps the greatest of the Romans, the noblest of the Romans. When old-fashioned writers talk about Roman virtue, what they have in mind is Marcus Aurelius.
I am shocked they didn't say Cicero. Cicero is definitely up there. Cicero essentially inspired like the French and American revolutions. Rediscovering his writings was really big into a lot of what we consider as Western civilization, the ideas of democracy, the ideas of you have a duty to do something if you can do it, those sorts of ideals.
A man who does what he ought to do regardless of circumstance. Tough Roman virtue. He's not afraid of being dead. He's not afraid of being in pain. He's not afraid of having people laugh at him. He's only afraid of doing what's wrong. He's only afraid of making chaos of his soul. Why?
And this is, I'll tell this story before I go because I'm starting to get tired, but you still get corrupted. No, true, but like, dude, if everything was perfect around you, would you become a bad apple? Probably not. Um, the Roman emperors that were corrupted, like Nero, it was either Nero or Caligula, like they were like really bad stuff happened to them when they were a child. So like that's why they turned out the way they did, and that's why they were so awful. Like imagine everything was perfect and you were directed to this noble goal under great people. Like it is not as impressive as it sounds. Like I think a lot of people could do it. Not taking anything away from it. There's definitely a lot of people that would fall, but I think this isn't something that's so unachievable. This isn't something that's so out of the question for people. But what he's saying here is interesting is that he didn't care if he lived or died, he just cared if he did the right thing. And this is really reminiscent of Cicero in that Cicero basically signed his own death warrant because Mark Antony read Caesar's will to the people of Rome. And reading Caesar's will, he basically crowned himself emperor. And Cicero did not like Mark Antony. He did not like Caesar really, but he thought Mark Antony was a fool. And he wrote, in my version, it was 17 pages. He wrote a letter basically denouncing Mark Antony as a fool and a guy that couldn't even keep his own house in order and that was in debts and that had to do all these ridiculous things and debase his family and all sorts of things. And really just insulted the most powerful man in the world at the time, and he was sentenced to death. The soldiers found him, and as the soldier is about to attack him and get rid of him in Minecraft, sorry, I feel like I already screwed it up. It's already messed up anyway. But as the soldier was about to sentence him to death, he said, "What you're doing is dishonorable, but do it with honor." And I think that's one of the coolest ways to go out. And that said, it was a pretty fun stream. Um, I will catch you guys Friday for sure. Not sure about tomorrow. Not sure if I'm gonna stream tomorrow, but yeah, it's good to be back. Good to stream. Thank you guys for being here. Love you guys so much. Thank you guys. Peace out. I will catch you in the next one. I love how I said that I didn't end it. Now I'm ending it, but yeah.